What's up, guys? My name is Merrick TV. We're kicking off our podcast again. I could not be more excited. We call this Coffee Break. Here's the Coffee Break mug, which is awesome. So basically what we do is we talk about games. We're all very passionate gamers. We've been gaming for a very long time. We sat around late at nights drinking coffee and staying up too late talking about video games, having really in-depth, involved discussions about the genre, MMOs especially, but, gaming, the industry, where games are going, where they've been, how they've evolved, what we like about some, what we don't like about others. And we eventually had people going, you guys should probably record these conversations and make a podcast. So we had a lot of fun doing that. We started this last year, but because everything sort of went crazy, we've taken this long break. But we're back. This is going to be the first of many coffee breaks going forward. We're incredibly excited to let you all know that this is going to be a weekly event. So the format is going to change a bit from the way that it was before, if you guys were around back then. We're not going to be as focused on guest stars, at least for a little while. Just kind of get this ball rolling again. We're going to be doing it every single week in a reliable time, which is going to be Friday evenings, just like we're starting right now. And it's also going to be a little bit shorter. We're going to go for about an hour and a half, pick a very specific topic or a set of specific topics and try to keep on topic. Difficult that is. So we'll see if that works. But let me introduce our awesome panel.
They say there's no audio. Is audio back? And is it relatively synced up with my face? Oh, Sarah can hear me. Okay. So that's good. Oh, seems good now. Okay. So we just have to find out if we can hear Marek.
It works.
I think it works for me, but not for Marek. So he's hearing me in cryptic. Oh, wait, did you hear? Did you hear him? I'm going to be doing a little bit of editing for the YouTube video. Take this part out.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear my audio through my microphone right here? Snap, snap, snap. Yes. Everything is back. Sorry, guys.
Great.
Things we didn't announce anything about Coffee Break before today. I knew it was going to be a little rough. We had to set all of this back up again. It's been a long time. It's also on a brand new computer, so I had to sort of rebuild it from scratch. And there's always going to be, if you guys watch our stream, for sure there's a lot of audio stuff. It takes some time to get that right. So below me is Cryptic Villain, a good friend of mine. We've been playing games together, raiding together for, what is it, like 3 years now or something like that? Something incredibly long period of time. We've raided all of the things you can raid. And then my beautiful wife in the bottom right-hand corner, that is Junie Vision. Needs no introduction from me. I think she's probably more famouser than me at this point.
No, Marek, no.
Definitely cuter and prettier and nicer than me. So welcome, Junie. For those of you guys who don't know, we actually met in a video game, met in Guild Wars 2, so it absolutely is perfect that we're able to sort of share this together, talk with you guys about all of this stuff. What's up, everybody? Cryptic, take it away. Lead the podcast. I'm going to drink my coffee, and I'll be back. I'll be back at the end.
Does everybody have their coffee?
Sounds good. I have water today, unfortunately.
Oh,
Cryptic, you're fired. Okay, we're taking auditions for new co-hosts here on Coffee Break. So if you drink coffee and play video games, that's the required thing.
I don't actually drink coffee, so
it's okay, Cryptic. You can bring tea.
I'll bring tea next time. Yeah.
Maddox coffee is ready, and Maddox had a really awesome coffee. She put it up there. It's had like cinnamon in it and all sorts of good stuff.
Oh my God, it's Sarek. What's up, Sarek? Long time, dude.
Sarek.
Good to see you, buddy. Okay, so like I said, in general, Coffee Break is going to be a little bit more specific. We're going to pick a topic, and we'll sort of go over that, debate it back and forth, for the hour. But for the first Coffee Break, we knew that was probably not going to work. There's so many things happening in the world of gaming right now that we have to sort of do a current events overview. Literally, in all of the time that we did Coffee Break or just sat around talking about video games, there has never been as many things happening as there are right now. It's kind of a crazy time in the world of gaming, as I'm sure all of you guys know. So we're going to cover a few different topics, but the first thing we're going to start with is something that Cryptic, Junie, and I all care very much about. I'm sure a lot of you guys in the chat as well. In Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 for the very first time in 4.5 years, I think it's been, since they released an expansion. I think it is.
Don't say it. It feels bad.
I just looked it up. I think POF came out 4.5 years ago.
Ouch. Ouch.
Staggering. Is about to release its next major expansion content in the form of End of Dragons, or EOD. I know that a lot of people feel very strongly about this in a lot of different directions. I just want to start by explaining why we're in this boat, right? We all love the game. The game kind of got like a very attentive group of people that like the game. They're very committed to Guild Wars 2. They really like the things about that, and they're never going to sort of leave. I understand that. But I think we saw ArenaNet go through a lot of interesting changes over the last few years. I looked at the numbers, and I wanted to know what you guys thought about this, Junie and Cryptic. It was fascinating for me to see the payment, like the revenue, and the sort of like number crunching that goes into that, how many people are attentively playing the game. And they sort of go up and down in this very reliable way. But it seemed like, in retrospect, that they were making a certain amount of money, and that amount, the same amount of money, was not being funneled back into Guild Wars 2. It makes a lot of sense now that we sort of ended up knowing that that's true, right? We discovered that they were actually working on a separate project. I don't think we ever confirmed exactly what that project was, but with all the layoffs that happened from ArenaNet last year, we got the feeling that that project was scrapped. And that now, for the first time in a very long time, all of ArenaNet's resources are going directly back into Guild Wars 2. So a lot of people feel like this is going to be a saving grace. A lot of people are feeling like this is going to be the make or break it moment. A lot of people feel like it's too late. So I've been sort of gauging people's reactions in the last couple of weeks. So what do you guys think about this? Are you pumped? Are you bummed? What's up?
Well, I mean, before I get my reaction, I just wanted to also say that something, I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but something else that I noticed was as the project started to get canned, I believe one of the big ones was their Dune. They had some kind of Dune project or something like that going
Was
on.
that confirmed? Because that would have been
a lot of art that was leaked, wasn't it?
Yeah, dude, because I'm such a Dune fan. Like, that would have been so awesome.
But I know they had one or two projects going on that got scrapped. And as those projects were ramping up, a lot of people that were big in the Guild Wars 2 departments left. And I know we saw the departure of those people, Colin Johansson being one of the big ones, went to Amazon. And then as that money started to get shuffled back into Guild Wars 2, those people started to come back. Again, Colin being one of the main ones has come back. So
on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was hyped about it, but I think my hype levels are the same as my concern levels.
Yeah.
I'm hyped that Guild Wars 2 is their priority again, and we're seeing that with End of Dragons. I'm concerned because I feel like the same issues that we've seen with the previous expansions and other content with Guild Wars 2 will continue, because it seems like the same people, as much as I liked those people and still do, are back, and they may just repeat the same cycle, if that makes sense.
So you said that you are excited, but those people are probably going to do the same things that result in the same things that happened with the previous expansions. Do you feel like the previous expansions were unsuccessful? Would you say that would be a negative thing if they got the same hype or the same result out of Heart of Thorns or POF? Would that be a failure at this point? Do they need it to be bigger and better than that?
I think it needs to be bigger and better. I mean, I think that it needs to be bigger and better than Path of Fire or Heart of Thorns, but I'm also even more concerned that this expansion is going to be, maybe not from a gameplay perspective, less than those expansions, but from a monetary perspective, it will be the least revenue generator of the previous two expansions. So not only is it starting from a position where it needs to be better than the previous expansions, but it's already behind the curve. I mean, we've seen with the advertisement. I mean, there is no advertisement.
Oh man. That's got to be the number one thing with ArenaNet, right? I think I just watched a video where one of the bigger reviewers of MMOs, one of the bigger voices in this arena, was talking about the lack of marketing, but more so like he went out and spoke with he called it, like he said, he went and that's all he keeps hearing from the content creators and influencers in the realm of Guild Wars 2 is that it's sort of very well known, right? Like we as the average player, the player base knows that Guild Wars 2 has always had this great game, but those of us who have played it, enjoyed it, wanted our friends to play it, wanted it to be more successful, make more money, are frustrated because we know that the game was good, we know that we liked it, but it seemed as though ArenaNet was not contributing enough towards getting it the attention that we felt it deserved. And this cannot be any exception to that, right? This has got to be maybe the most egregious version of this. Do you feel like End of Dragons has gotten any hype? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it anywhere.
Zero, and it's honestly astounding. I mean, what's the saying? Any word is, or you know, any advertisement is good advertisement. I forget what the saying is, but you know,
all what is it? Even bad publicity is good publicity.
Yes, that is what I was looking for.
All news is good news. Wait,
good
no.
News.
All
I think it's all publicity is good publicity. Yeah. Junie pretty much got it. I mean, I just don't understand if they were so concerned about. The only thing I can envision is they were concerned about delays, which we have obviously seen. There's some, there's some delays coming. It that still doesn't make sense to me why they wouldn't be hyping this up from months ago at the very least. I mean, we've seen games with, albeit larger advertisement budgets, but Cyberpunk was hyped up for years. I mean,
you compare probably the worst amount of marketing to the most insane levels of marketing the gaming has ever seen in the history of the entire genre. Never hyped as much as Cyberpunk, which of course ended up being their downfall, right? But
I'm assuming there's a happy
maybe that wasn't their downfall, but it highlighted their downfall.
I mean, I think if the game had come out in a polished state, nobody would have cared. It wouldn't have been their downfall. But I think the game still sold incredibly well, and from a business perspective, that's all you care about. I mean, that's the main thing you care about.
Do you think that's true in terms of CD Projekt Red? Because I feel like there's another kind of currency. And I was just talking about this when it comes to Blizzard, right? This is a segue into a later discussion, but Blizzard is the same way. CD Projekt Red and Blizzard both commanded a certain level of respect and admiration as game developers. Now, it's funny to say that with Blizzard. I get that. It's been so long since that's been true, but it was true for a long time, a very long time. People were like, Blizzard is this great company. It's going to finish when it's going to finish. We're not rushing them. They're going to be done when they're done, and the product is going to be great. Like, we trust them. And CD Projekt Red was even more than that. They was like, they're a great company. They would be good to work for. Everyone would love to work for them. They're good to their employees. They're good to their customers. Good old games that give their stuff away. Like, they've been really good for the consumer. Like, they had this element about them, this intangible thing that I think made people really excited for it. And maybe they didn't lose money on Cyberpunk. My guess is they actually made a ton, but they spent all of that other currency. It's gone. People think CD Projekt Red is a sham at this point, right? Yeah. Not only did they find out that the game was bad and being lied about, right? They lied about, but also the total opposite. It's a bad place to work for, right? It turned out that they were jerks to their employees. They were all sorts of terrible behind-the-scenes stuff. And now with Blizzard, we're finding out the same thing. Like, not only have people been like the completely heinous accusations that we've all seen, but also the trust that we had in Blizzard is gone. Like, we no longer believe that they're going to take as long as they need to, and the game that comes out is going to be great. That was there for 15 plus years, and then it's been gone. So I think there's a couple of different things in terms of currency with customers, and it's true. It comes out for any game, there's a spike, right? But do they keep the players for any long period of time? And Guild Wars 2 has always struggled with that, don't you think? Since its initial release, I'd say.
So I don't want to take this too far off topic, especially when we talk about this later, but when did you lose that faith in Blizzard? For me, it was Diablo 3. I mean, I wasn't the biggest Blizzard person in general, but Diablo 3 was the point where I was like, this
Cryptic,
company
do you even have a cell phone? And that, of course, is later. But
yeah.
God, that's a really excellent question.
Yeah.
And not to make it less interesting by absolutely copying your answer, but it's dead on true. I mean, it was Diablo 3.
Yeah.
It was Diablo 3 because they displayed an exceptional level of disconnect from their player base that blew my mind. It was the first step that they ever made visually that we all became aware of. The first thing that we ever saw that was overtly greedy. Like, so Cryptic, you're probably thinking that the game was just bad, but for me it was like, yeah, the game is bad, but I could maybe forgive it. I like the world, I like the universe, I like the characters, I like the classes. I was excited. They weren't gender locked classes. Like, that really drives me nuts about games. Diablo 2 suffered from that. There were things that I liked about it. I was also afraid because of the leaps and bounds that the technologically gaming had made in the gap between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 that they would change the format too much. I really liked its isometric feel. But it was the auction house. Somebody just said it, Tiffy. Yes, it was overtly greedy. They were trying to steal money from everyone with the real life auction house. I couldn't believe that they could be so disconnected. Not to mention offline gameplay. Diablo 3 must be played online. Had to be played online. Must be. I mean, these were things that just, I felt like they didn't know their player base at all.
Yep. And Junie, was that a similar for you? Was it Diablo 3 that kind of I mean, I don't want to say put the nail in the coffin. That sounds finite, but really where you feel like,
I think that was definitely the biggest one. Although, yeah, like Diablo 3 was definitely where it all started with that. But in contrast, I was just thinking about how even though all of these companies are making all these like grievous mistakes, as you can kind of put it, what was a big surprise was actually the Final Fantasy XIV release of Endwalker this year, and how to give publicity, how to give a date when something is going to be released. And then, okay, that date did not happen, but the apology letter that was given by the director was something that how could anyone really blame the company for that? Like, they overshot, it's okay, they apologized and they made amends for that, and it's been amazing for them.
I think ties exactly into what we're talking about here, because that is the other currency that I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
They had positive currency that they build up with their player base. Their player base, like, I was one of them, and this is a big deal when a huge expansion comes out for a very popular game. People take time off of work, like they get excited. It's a big deal, and they push it back, and they push it back very last minute. They didn't let people know ahead of time. And so in a game that people would be likely to hate them for, right? Like Guild Wars 2 just did it. They didn't give us a date until the month of the release. And because they had stuck out for this month, and obviously it's not a great thing, they pushed it back to the very last day in this month. Like, everyone is afraid of disappointing people, but Final Fantasy XIV showed just how essentially important that intangible currency with their player base really is. They came last minute and pushed back their expansion. Last minute. They said it wasn't what we wanted it to be. It's not quite what we want it to be. We don't feel good about it. And they acknowledged it. They were like, we know that people take time off of work. We know this is a really big deal. And the way in which they treated that on such a personal level, right? It's a cultural difference in companies, because Japanese companies work very differently than Western companies. But boy, did that resonate, not just with Japanese markets, but around the world. Every person I ever talked to, even people that did take off work and had all of that screwed up, held no ill will towards this company that did this kind of thing. And here we're watching what we're actually supposed to be talking about here is End of Dragons, that they basically afraid of having that happen, where they didn't want to have to push back the day from a time that they said. Were so reluctant to give a date that they lost out on a huge opportunity for hype. Like, they just didn't want to talk about it. And I just wanted, before I pass this off again, I wanted to say one of the craziest things that I saw, somebody brought this up the other day, I can't remember who, but they said it was such this epic waste of an opportunity for 2/22/22 on a Tuesday for Guild Wars 2 Tuesday. Like, it would have been insane. I mean, that's like the coolest thing they ever could have done. And knowing that was there and pushing it back just one more week to get to the very last day in February, that feels to me like there's a potential for them feeling very far behind and very afraid of alienating anybody. So,
But see, what that screams to me is that there is competing, um, uh, the leadership has values. Have different values on the currency at competing levels. So maybe someone like Colin Johansson or maybe someone like that who cares about the end product is pushing for let us delay this as long as possible. And someone in not marketing, but someone who cares more about the financial side of things is saying we need to get this out as quickly as possible. And their compromise is to delay the marketing as much as possible to give them flexibility in where they end up. But because to me, if what they were actually going for was the most profitable, or not the most profitable, but the most, best outcome for the consumer, and that was the only currency that they were pushing, they could say, okay, the 28th is when it'll actually be ready. Let's just market it for the whole month of February and then the whole next month, and then it'll come out. Right? Like, what's the harm in just saying, oh, the game will be ready for a month? Nobody will know that, but it'll give us an extra month to market it. And I feel like that's where the misstep has really happened, where because they're making these compromises for when the game is going to actually be launched and when it's actually going to be ready, they have sacrificed marketing in order to please the different, leadership heads that are pushing for different things.
But what do you think is better? So chat, maybe you guys can chime in on this too. Like, we've been waiting 4.5 years for an expansion for Guild Wars 2, right? Like, I will wait another month or two. This game needs to come out great, right? Don't you all feel like that's true? I think that there's been this sort of feeling in the community, and I've been trying to talk to as many people as I can, that this somehow feels like a make or break moment for this game. Like, it all kind of comes down to this expansion. And I think it was brought up about a year ago when they finally said that they were delaying the release of Guild Wars 2 on Steam, right? That was a big thing as well.
Yeah.
It was sort of like this big event. I think we all assumed that it was going to be pushed back for the release of VOD, sort of put all of your eggs in one basket, hit them with a great expansion, get as much hype as you can for the game, as much opportunity to get people's eyes back on the game, and then to sell them on that really good expansion.
Mm-hmm.
I am always, and Cryptic, I think you brought this up as like a coffee break topic that we could do a whole coffee break on, like the significance and the detriment to gaming development companies to feel like they have to come out early and come out unfinished. Because if a game is unfinished, you have lost. You've lost a lot. I think somebody brought up when we were talking about Diablo 3 a little while ago, that Diablo 3 launched in probably one of the most comical launches that it's ever happened. People were crashing like crazy on day one. They couldn't get in. There was error, whatever it was called. Error, I forgot the number. But we all memed about it for forever, right? Because the game was just buggy and not ready. I think so many good games lost an opportunity because they were racing. I think, yeah, people are disappointed when you put a game off, but how much better is it when the game is better upon release? I think as Guild Wars 2 players, no one here can... Error 37. Thank you, Andershaw. What's up, Andershaw? Nobody can forget the single biggest marketing event that happened for Guild Wars 2 in the last 5 years. And it had nothing to do with Guild Wars 2. And it had nothing to do with ArenaNet. It was Bless Online. Do you remember that when that happened? It was insane. It was insane. This other game that had gotten all of this hype, this huge amount of hype, and then the game came out and was utterly disastrous. It was a terrible launch. It was just absolutely awful. And I think it was Peon, right? Who did like a video going, he was really on the hype train for Bless, and he was like, I'm so bummed about this. I'm going to start playing Guild Wars 2 again. And he did like a Guild Wars 2, like going back to Guild Wars 2 because it had like a similar vibe to what Bless was trying to achieve or something. And it created this insane influx of brand new players into Guild Wars 2. And this is one of the things I love about GW2 so much is that I saw something unprecedented, something I've never seen before in the history of any game. We all, like the community at large, became aware of this event, that there was this enormous influx of brand new players that were coming from this disappointment from another game. And there were an army of Apple tags out there, right? Mentor tags. And armies of these people were going out into the starting zones and just shouting, like offering help, answering questions. It was the warmest reception to a bunch of brand new players to a video game that I have ever seen in my history of gaming. It was just absolutely staggering. I heard about it, I saw it, I went out and was like, I have an Apple tag and I put one on too, and I just started running around and helping newbies. It was such this amazing event, and it was orchestrated by the failure of another game to come out finished. So it's just, it can be a really, game defining element as to whether or not it's done when you release. Most people are not going to forgive you. Can you think about some good examples of games that came out awful and then fixed it? Because of all the games that have ever done that, I can think of 2. Give me one, Cryptic.
No Man's Sky is one. Final Fantasy is another.
Yeah. And Elder Scrolls Online.
Oh, Elder Scrolls Online, yeah.
Forget ESO, but I would say No Man's Sky is one of the greatest examples. And Final Fantasy, in terms of MMOs, Final Fantasy has a couple of elements about it that just literally I've never seen. Like, and we were talking about their goodwill that they've earned with their community has sort of bought them a couple of these opportunities. But you know what? Our game sucks. It's just not fun. It didn't turn out how we wanted it to. We're going to start over kind of rename it and rebrand it. It literally is called A Realm Reborn because they killed their realm and rebuilt it. And there's documentaries out there, guys. If you haven't seen this, it's like, it's shocking. You guys should watch this. Like what that company went through, what Square went through, to keep Final Fantasy alive, to rebuild that game, and to have it now be as successful as it is shocking. It's absolutely crazy. Elder Scrolls also came out really crappy. For any of you guys who started that game, it wasn't ready, didn't have, you couldn't pick up junk off the floor. You couldn't steal, you couldn't pickpocket, all these things that are so essentially Elder Scrolls were not there. And that game today is very successful, and they somehow managed to kind of have people come back. But for the most part, by and large, it's really scary to come out with a game incomplete.
Wouldn't you say that Final Fantasy Online also did something similar to ESO, where it started in a very different way than the game that exists today?
Yeah, the game is nothing like how it was initially. In fact, I think that the game actually offers, don't they give some sort of cool perks and a title or something if you were one of the people who were around during the original game and stuck it out and came back to A Realm Reborn. It's cool that they acknowledge their diehard dedicated player base, because from what I'm told, and I didn't play it back then, but it was just a shadow of the game that it is today. And it's kind of amazing that they managed to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, I think New World is actually another game that is primed for this, but I fear Amazon won't actually keep it around long enough to make that a thing.
I'm also afraid for New World.
Yeah, but I mean, New World, the base of New World is really primed for success. It just needs to be rebuilt. But back to End of Dragons, if this expansion is a failure, and I don't just mean from a buggy perspective, just any perspective possible.
You mean
that
the
would
fishing
make this...
isn't the exciting raid content we want it to be?
Yeah. We know it won't have raids. I mean, that's already going to be a sad point for us. But as far as the mass market appeal that they're going for, which is the majority of their player base is a more casual orientated nature. If this is a failure for them, do you think this is not the end of Guild Wars? Their cash shop makes money, but will there never be another expansion for Guild Wars 2? Will they 100% shift to a new project as a studio?
So I've given that some good thought. Every expansion that's come out, I considered Heart of Thorns and POF to both be successes. As a player, that's never where I am complaining about Guild Wars 2. You guys know I love the game. I love the game more than probably 99% of people who play the game. I met my wife in that game. I'm dedicated to Guild Wars 2, but I have a lot of complaints. And for those of us who are, sweaty tryhards in the end game scene, this game is not for us. It wasn't made for us initially. The fact that we sandwiched ourselves into it, we have expectations that this game never promised to deliver. So I try to give it the benefit of the doubt a lot of times. But even as a raider, my complaint about Guild Wars 2 has never come about during its expansion time. In fact, I would say the two most awesome moments for me in that video game period were the several months after an expansion launched. Do you remember what it was like when people were flooding in to the jungle right at the launch of HOT? It was such an awesome time. There were real goals to work for that felt really worthwhile. The story was epic and grand and awesome. They set up the meta events, which were just, groundbreaking. Let's call it what it is. The meta events in Guild Wars 2 are groundbreaking. I've never seen anything like that before, and they're incredible. They only get old later when you find out that there's practically no reward for it, right? Like I think Guild Wars 2 has never been bad on content. They're bad on replayability, and they're bad on reward versus effort put in. Which is why, and I got some hardcore awesome Raider friends in the chat here. Humes, what's up, man? I see you in there. There are people who, the only way that we as hardcore gamers can keep Guild Wars 2 alive is by creating our own goals that are completely arbitrary in terms of like tangible MMO progression, right? Like nothing that Humes does or Isa does or Win does or I do is getting us anything tangible. We have to create our own thing. Like if I create a meme build and try to get good DPS on it, like Isa and Win try to beat a record, right? Like a world record. And that's fun because we're creating it ourselves. But in terms of like when content is fresh and new, it's always fun to play through for the first time. And I'm never mad at the game at that moment. It's always later after things settle in, and I'm like, well, now what? And there literally are a big contingent of Guild Wars 2 players who play the game like this, which is, again, that applies to a completely different kind of MMO gamer than myself and then you, Cryptic, where, somebody goes, oh, there's a new Living World story. Time to go back to Guild Wars 2. I'll play it for a couple of weeks, and then I put it down, and then I'll come back next time there is one. Like that doesn't work for me. I want to live in my world. I want that game to be all encompassing. I want it to be as involving as humanly possible. And so when I'm sort of beating my head against a wall and not really getting rewarded for anything, that's when my disappointment comes in. So if the game comes out, End of Dragons, I think I'm less jaded about its or less skeptical about its initial release, but I'm more skeptical than ever about its ability to keep a certain kind of player in the game, because I don't know. I feel like they're moving even farther away from being the kind of game that is going to keep end game players like myself in, but we'll see. I mean, I guess it'll depend.
So you don't think that you don't think that the expansion could be a negative experience for the casual player at all? You think that will be successful for them regardless of? Because I think that's who they're targeting.
That's a great question, because I think, like I said, I think from the very beginning when we all played Guild Wars 2, there was a huge drop off, right? For those of you guys who were around in the very beginning of Guild Wars 2, there's a shared experience of those of us who were there in the beginning. It's basically universally shared. Anyone who was around in the beginning can kind of laugh about this with each other, because it's really funny. We all got in the game, we logged in, we're like, oh my god, the hype is so real. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the hype train for Guild Wars 2, but it was through the roof. I mean, people were exceptionally excited for this game, and I was no exception to that. It was supposed to be a WoW killer. It looks so cool. I barely played Guild Wars 1. I wasn't even hyped because of that. I was tracking every post and every video. And so then when the game came out, we all rushed in it and we're like, hey, not disappointed. This game is awesome. The art style, totally unique and cool. The combat style, completely unique and amazing. The voice acting, decent, and everything is voice acted. The Living World story, fine. It's engaging enough, right? And then we all got to max level, and then that's it. We all left. There was nothing to do. The end game was not there. It wasn't fleshed out at all. And I think I saw somebody who was talking about it in one of the YouTube videos I watched recently, who was saying that there was an end game, but it wasn't at all the end game that most MMO, like previous MMO players, were looking for or wanted. So basically everyone sort of trickled away from Guild Wars 2. And some people came back when fractals were released and pushed and more challenging content came out, and then HOT brought people back and brought in raids. I think they knew that there had to be at least some semblance of an end game, but by and large, for 99% of content releases for Guild Wars 2, yes, to answer your question, I feel like they are completely they're completely built around their casual player base. That this game is this odd hybrid of casual and it's probably the most casual game in terms of systems and difficulty and leveling and alt making and all of this stuff, or gearing especially. But then when you get to end game, you all of a sudden find out that if you want to take this game and its unique combat system to its highest level in terms of like rating and DPS rotations, that there's a giant divide between the casual and the hardcore player. Now, sure, I guess they've tried to keep us around in terms of adding some raids occasionally, but I think that 99% of content for ArenaNet is made for that casual player, and I think they're really good at it. I mean, wouldn't you say, like, don't you think that most casual players who play Guild Wars 2 are in general pretty happy with the way that the game comes with its new releases?
Oh, absolutely. And also the gameplay itself, like you said in the past, is incredibly good. It's smooth, it's fun. There's nothing like it in any other MMO really. And even quality of life things. They make the game great for alts and for creating exactly what you want. The problem really just comes with like end reward. And there are things like legendaries, but I've always personally felt that the amount of effort put in is just too much for what you get back.
It's because it's more. This is again completely given towards the casual player, right? You can get any shiny, big, fancy item, like the biggest and best things. They're not locked behind raids, right? In most games, in most MMOs, the coolest looking gear, the strongest gear, all of that is locked behind the hardest content. In terms of legendaries, you can be very casual and play very infrequently and play entirely solo. And you can get the coolest, flashiest gear in the game. It's just going to take a while. And that's basically how they built all their systems. Do a little bit every day, and you'll eventually get anything and everything you've ever wanted. Now, that statement right there is probably pretty polarizing for most people in chat. I'm sure some people feel like that's great. Like, why are you complaining about that? That's the best thing I've ever heard. I don't want to play WoW. I don't want to feel like I have to raid to get story for my expansion. I don't want to feel like I have to get like in a sweaty guild that where there's always drama and intense expectation, and I got to practice my rotations. I got to do all this. Like, I don't want to talk to people. I want to play a massively multiplayer game and be by myself doing things on my own at my own pace. And I want to be able to get anything and everything that the game has to offer by doing that. So there's a huge contingent of players these days who feel very strongly about it in that way. And so I think even the legendary, even the gearing, all of that is still all breaks down to this sort of like casual versus hardcore divide.
I mean, they're definitely moving more and more in that direction. I mean, the new legendary weapons are going to be purchasable on the TP again. So,
Are they really? I didn't even know that.
Yep. Yeah. So,
I always felt, didn't they say that was
skip
a
the grind
mistake that they
entirely.
wished that they could have undone, making tier 1 legendary sellable on the trading post? I thought that was like a.
Yeah, that was their statement. That was their statement when they released the T2 ones, and now they're going back on that. I mean, I think it's because they make more money that way with people buying and converting gems, but two, I mean, it gives
I guess
people
that's true.
another option. So,
Well, I think in general, I think the dedicated Guild Wars 2 players are pretty excited. I watched another video that seemed to show that most players who had been playing the game in the beta and the closed betas and stuff have had a favorable experience with it. And again, I really doubt we're going to see something like the game releases, we all play it for 2 days, and we're like, screw this sucks. I don't think that's true. I think we're all going to have a pretty decent time when the game releases. I'm excited. Myself, I will be back to playing and streaming EOD the moment that comes out. I think it's four strike missions that they're coming out with when the game comes out. So there's a little bit to do. That's essentially, if you squish them together, that's one wing 4, right? That's a raid wing.
I think you have to do the story too before you can unlock the strike missions. So
Yeah, well, and I will. I actually don't mind doing the story. I think the story is fun for its first playthrough. So I highly expect a very
as long as it's
similar
not Dragon
graph.
Response.
I think that we're going to see a very similar reaction to all of the other expansions. It's going to be a giant spike. People are going to stay with it for a while, and then they're going to taper off as they have before. So that's my prediction. I want it to be wrong. There's no game on the planet that I want to do better than Guild Wars 2. I would love to see them become the biggest and best game. I just feel like they'd have to make some changes that they're probably not ready to make yet. I think we should all, before we move off of Guild Wars 2, I think we should all acknowledge the fact that it's kind of amazing that this game is still going after the last year and a half that it's had. I think we were all very afraid of what was going to happen with any possibility of a new expansion ever. There were months at a time where people were sure that we were never going to get another tangible expansion ever again. ArenaNet looked like they were imploding. For anyone on the outside, it looked disastrous. I know that as a lover of Guild Wars 2, I was very afraid for that. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I would love to see the game do well. I will be back, but do I think that anything is going to change dramatically in terms of how they're going to do their long-term game? I doubt it. I don't think so.
Well, before we move on, I wanted us all to kind of give like our quick short prediction for what we think the expansion will be. I mean, for mine, I think it's going to be financially underwhelming for ArenaNet, and it's going to convince the people that care about finances there that Guild Wars 2 should be left to run its course. But I think it's going to be successful.
Like Guild Wars 1, just left in the corner doing its
yes, yep, exactly. I think that it's going to be successful for the casual player, and I think the hardcore player is going to be disappointed. That's my predictions for End of Dragons.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the first expansion brought huge change in terms of gliding, and I think a lot of people say like gliding in the first game and mounts in the second one. Second expansion, but what gliding was like a symptom of what the real change was that Guild Wars 2 added a level of verticality that has never been seen in an MMO before. That really changed the way that we all experienced a game. Like you could jump off these cliffs, and the size of the up and down axis was enormous. I mean, it was such a staggering change to the way that an MMO is played. That was great. I loved it. I think it was fantastic. Mounts really did, I think, kind of define Guild Wars 2, right? If you really wanted to say, I think if most players were to define the difference between Guild Wars 2 and other games, one of the first things out of their mouths would be, oh my god, mounts. They're so cool, so unique, right? I just saw like a YouTube short, some dude was teasing about this. He's like, gliding, this is flying, kinda. This is cool. And then mounts is like, man, we're like traversing the desert on all these mounts. These are super cool. And then he goes, I wonder what EOD is going to bring us. And then he's like sitting there fishing. He goes, oh. So like they're adding another mount, sure, which is great. And I don't know. I actually like fishing. Do I think it's going to be as game changing as gliding and mounts? Probably not. But I think I agree with you, Cryptic. I think it's going to be considered a success for most casual players who are already playing Guild Wars 2. Right? I think it's going to be a minor success and then probably a disappointment for most hardcore players who are also playing Guild Wars 2. And I think it is not going to pan out to be the giant beacon to bring everyone back to Guild Wars 2 that we hoped that it would be. But I desperately want it to be, even though I don't think it is. And that comes back to marketing. Not necessarily their own game. I think, I watched that trailer, the gameplay or the features trailer. And I wasn't as disappointed as everyone else. I was like, hey, that looks kind of cool. Like if I had not played Guild Wars 2 in 3 or 4, 5 years and I saw that, I'd be like, hey, maybe I'll come back. But that just didn't get out enough. There wasn't enough hype. There wasn't enough build up. There wasn't enough, all of that kind of stuff. So
the new city looks nice. I don't know if you've seen the trailer for the Cyberpunk city, basically.
Dude, and before the last 2 weeks, did you know that that's how that was going to be? Because that was like a total shocker for me.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like a little like JD, but I didn't think it was going to be cyberpunk kind of.
No, they're like, by the way, while we've not been in Cantha, they've become like technological crazy people. They've built Neo Tokyo out there, like it's just absolutely insane. And no one saw that coming. That's actually one of the things that caught my eye. I was like, whoa, that was a surprise and actually kind of cool. So I'm huge. I'm huge on that. I think it could be cool for those of us who are already playing and liking the game. Again, I don't think it's going to change enough minds unless we get that game out there more. I was excited to see what's his name is coming back to Guild Wars 2. He said that he was excited for it in that video that I watched. Let me look. It was Bellular Gaming, right? He did this big thing about how Guild Wars 2 deserves better. It's a better MMO than it's getting. It's a better MMO than it has been rewarded for. You know, like it should have a bigger player base, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end of that video, he said a lot of really nice things about Guild Wars 2, which I feel like a lot of people do. Peon does the same thing. Anytime somebody talks about it and goes back and plays it, they're like, hey, this is actually a good game. Where the heck has this been? And that's sort of like a shared experience, I think, among Guild Wars 2 players. So my hope is that a couple of content creators coming back are going to do some of the advertising for the game that we are currently missing. Again, whether they stay or not, we'll see. We'll see. So we got to move on. I know it would be very easy to do an entire End of Dragons podcast, but it's a little later than we thought it was going to be. So let's move on. The other really big thing that's been going on in the world of gaming is that Lost Ark is coming. And this is hilarious to me because Lost Ark has been something that everyone has been talking about in the MMO expanse, right? This is a really big deal.
We don't get any MMOs, so whenever there's another MMO,
you're right. And this isn't even a classic MMO; it's an MMO ARPG.
You know, I honestly think a company could make any game, regardless, like any genre, FPS, anything, and if they put MMO next to it, it would be headline news because it's a new MMO.
Yeah, headline news where everyone like wants to go look at it so that they can throw rotten fruit because like people are just so disappointed with any new addition to the MMO genre. It's so hard to do that. And that's actually one of the things that, I mean, let's just to break off and talk about MMOs in general for a second. MMOs are a terrible investment. The worst investment. These games take years to develop, enormous production teams, and they're horrendously expensive. And it is probably the biggest gamble that you can make as a company to try to make an MMO.
It's why we have
wonderfully or failed terribly. It's just kind of how that works.
It's why we have so much like pseudo MMOs have eclipsed. There are more pseudo MMOs than there are MMOs now.
So
because
true.
It makes more sense to develop a regular game and then add MMO aspects in to keep the microtransactions flowing. So pseudo MMOs have just taken over or I shouldn't say taken over, but you know, you get 2 pseudo MMOs for every MMO, if that. I mean, it's probably way higher, like 5 for every one. I mean, I'm glad that we're getting Lost Ark and that we had New World. We'll talk about New World some other time.
Would you call Lost Ark a pseudo MMO?
No. I think it's going to be an MMO. Like Path of Exile is a pseudo MMO. If you want Lost Ark but a pseudo MMO, go play Path of Exile.
Well, wait, would you then say like where would the line be between MMO and pseudo MMO? Would it just be like anything that's multiplayer that has some sort of microtransactions?
I think he's attaching pseudo to the MM part.
The massively multiplayer.
Yes.
A lot of games that will fit the format of an MMO, but are like, oddly enough, I would put Guild Wars 1 in the category of a pseudo MMO. It's actually really interesting how we sort of define that. Like, and it's the same way as it was. In fact, Guild Wars 2 or Guild Wars 1 and Path of Exile are identical in that sense, where you go back to town and that's where you see other people. The entirety of the rest of the game is instanced. Right? Yep. Now, this is a huge departure in terms of like MMO anthropology. When MMOs first came out, there was no such thing as instancing. That was a concept that didn't exist. Everything was open world. That limited the kind of storytelling you could do, the kind of grouping that you could do. The biggest amount of customer service interventions in the game were not, hey, I'm stuck or my quest is bugged. It was, this guy's stealing all my mobs and I need I need help because they're camping my stuff, and because you had to share everything. Modern games, yes, it's so much easier in terms of cost effectiveness, servers, and storytelling. You can be a lot more like a single player game and cater to the single person who wants to play solo in a pseudo MMORPG. So it does make sense. It's also a less cost risk kind of thing.
Do we know if Lost Ark is instanced more, or is it more open world?
It is instanced. There's a lot of instancing in it, like there is in a normal game. But it is, as far as I know, now I will fully admit to you guys right here that I have not played Lost Ark. I have intentionally not played Lost Ark. I know that it's out, and this is what I wanted to say. For those of you guys who are new to this, I just want to give like a little overview if you have not heard about Lost Ark. Lost Ark is an MMO ARPG, which stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Action Role-Playing Game. action role-playing game, or ARPG, is like a very strange, arbitrary term given to a very specific, it's a very generic term given to a very specific genre, which is an isometric RPG. I actually think that it should probably be called that instead. But an ARPG is the term that is used to describe Diablo, Path of Exile, games that have an isometric view at an angle to give a three-dimensional experience on a two-dimensional space. So you're not able to pan your camera around in a first-person way. It is top-down in a three-dimensional, pseudo-three-dimensional way, kind of like Baldur's Gate, if you ever played that. So this game, like Diablo, like Grim Dawn or Path of Exile or any of those kinds of games, is going to be that in an MMORPG kind of way. So there are many servers. It's going to be a big experience of story and collaborative gameplay. There's going to be very involved and difficult PvP content. There's going to be very challenging and involved endgame raid PvE content. So people are really excited about this. And a lot of the hype that's behind this game, and why I think it's important to note, because we were talking about how MMOs kind of come and then fail and like build up hype or don't. Lost Ark has existed and is live right now, but it is an Eastern game that is coming to the West. We're seeing this as a trend more and more. For those of you guys who remember Sword of Legends Online, do you remember the huge splash that made in the MMO scene when that first came out? Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was playing it. No, it was big. People were talking about it.
No. It was. I had no interest in it.
It wasn't that exciting. I did. I played it.
You played it? Wow. Okay.
I played it. We played it for maybe about a week. It did not hold my interest. I think as far as what I expected an Eastern game to be, it wasn't as bad as I thought that it was. But the story, even though it's basically like a very classic MMO, like classic in terms of combat systems, questing. There was nothing truly unique or revolutionary about it at all. Yeah. But in terms of like an unremarkable older MMO, it actually did what it did really well. But as it turns out, if I don't like the world, I don't like the characters, I'm not immersed in the art style, and it's a classic MMO without a lot of unique new flair, it's not going to keep me. That's basically what I learned from Sword of Legends Online. So Lost Ark, yeah, go ahead.
Before we get more into what Lost Ark is about, I just wanted to say Lost Ark is heavily instanced, like some MMOs are, not a lot of them, but I believe it does have, and when you're out in the open world, again, I haven't played Lost Ark either, when you're out doing stuff in the open world, there is like an open world where you can see other people. Right. There is like mini bosses and like, like world bosses and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes. So there is an open world and there will be other people that you can see. It won't just be in towns like Path of Exile. And of course there is instance content like dungeons and raids and stuff. And I think that's what separates a pseudo MMO from it. Like you think like Path of Exile or Destiny or Division or, any of those kind of, or even No Man's Sky that Tiffy was talking about.
Would you put No Man's Sky in that category? I think I would.
Tiffy did. I kind of, because you can group with other people and it's instance based, right? I mean, yeah. And like,
so MMORPG.
Okay.
Second M is reserved for games that are massively multiplayer.
That's fair.
I think that's a very specific genre. I think like while it might be technically true, it's disingenuous to I think it dilutes the actual genre of MMORPG.
Yeah, that's fair.
To add things that I don't think quite fit it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think what separates it for me as far as like Destiny and them go is that like the group with not just a group of other people, but to do things with other people in the open world, you have to group with them. In most cases, I know Destiny has some things where you can see a bunch of people in one area, but it's been so long since I played Destiny.
But like town hubs, right? Or
well, not just town hubs. I think Destiny in some of the open world or in their instance areas, they will bring people in, like automatically. It will bring people in, but it is not like. Like for example, if me and you are on the same server in Lost Ark and we're going to do this world boss, we don't have to be in the same party. We don't even have to know that we're going to be going there. We don't have to swap servers or anything too crazy. Just make sure we're kind of in the same general, region, and we will see each other when we get there. And I feel like that's something that MMOs do in general and pseudo MMOs don't.
And also something I feel like we're losing as time goes by. I was watching a
Yes.
very interesting podcast the other day. It really just blew my mind because for those of you who don't know, I've been playing MMOs since like the dawn of MMOs. I've been playing since EverQuest, and EverQuest really changed my life back in the day. And I've watched the genre change and move away from a lot of the things that I think made EverQuest really magical. A lot of the really cool elements about that game that it created the experiences that I remember that have really defined gaming for me are sort of gone. And a lot of that comes from instancing and sort of like the change that has happened from there. But it was so cool because I watched this podcast with like one of the original developers from EverQuest and sort of like them figuring out how that worked and then adding instancing in for the first time in Lost Dungeons of North. It was an expansion. It was like several expansions in where they discovered that they could do instancing and how that sort of changed their storytelling and the way that the game worked. There's a lot of positives to instancing. But I think that you also kind of take away a lot of cool experiences. I've said this a lot in terms of Guild Wars 2, and this is a huge credit to ArenaNet and to Guild Wars 2, because I think Guild Wars 2, in terms of the evolution of the MMO genre, they're like the first game ever that made it so an open world game was experienced in a way that when you saw other people, that experience was a positive thing. You were really glad to see these random other people. You didn't have to talk with them, right? You didn't have to coordinate. You didn't have to group. But the fact that they were there, near you, around you, made events happen, made events more successful. There was no such thing as stealing mobs or experience or quest progress or resource nodes. Like all of this was really great, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Lost Ark is going to be really cool. I'm excited for it. It releases on the 11th in the West. Like I said, it's been going for a long time in the East. So
the 8th, if you have the founders, one of the founders packs.
Oh, that's correct. Yes, if you buy one of the packages, it releases on the 8th.
That's correct.
Right.
The 8th
In fact,
of February.
We are hosting an event in our Discord on the 8th for anyone who has a pre-purchase for the game. We're going to be sort of like tackling it all together. We're going to make a guild. We got a bunch of people. So if you guys haven't joined the Discord, join the Discord if you're interested in playing. Otherwise, the game is free, and it will be free on the 11th. So hopefully we will see you there for that. It's going to be pretty cool. To the next giant topic that is happening right now, which is of course what everyone is talking about. The big, ugly, scary, nasty, intimidating monopoly purchase of Microsoft buying out ABK, or Activision Blizzard King. This is sort of all there is in the news of the gaming news cycle right now. It is absolutely huge. It is truly the biggest single purchase that has ever been made in the history of gaming. Mm-hmm. Let that sink in. It's crazy. It like literally 2021, because of COVID, broke gaming sales revenue records. No time in history have we spent as a community more money on video games. And you know how much we spent as a whole community of gaming players across the entire year? $60 billion. And in a single purchase, Microsoft purchased ABK for $68.7 billion. It's absolutely staggering. It's terrifying, I think, for a lot of people. There's a lot of things that people are concerned about. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think I'm less concerned than most people, but I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say about it.
I personally, first off, I think most people's concerns are valid. I mean, I think that, you know, it's totally valid to be concerned about your favorite game no longer being on a platform that you like, or you know, prices changing, or whatever the case may be. I will say, this is never going to, I mean, I don't know if the acquisition has been officially approved by the FTC, but when it does, because it will be, this is not a monopoly. Microsoft's acquisition of ABK doesn't even put them in the first or second spot as far as video game market share. They would still be third after acquiring ABK.
But behind
Nintendo and Sony are Sony's 1, Nintendo's 2, which blows my mind.
That actually shocks me that's true.
Yes, Sony's video game department is still their largest revenue income. It's actually probably the only thing keeping them afloat, honestly. They make a ton of money from video games. Everything else, well, in their camera department, but everything else about Sony is not great right now. But that's for another podcast.
Yeah, and okay, so like I think that it has to be said immediately where my bias comes from. My bias is definitely significant. I, as a PC gamer, have a very different experience from a console gamer, right? A console gamer is going to look at this very differently. Microsoft owns Windows, and the Game Pass thing that exists with Microsoft overlaps with me. Like in terms of a purist PC gamer, there's very little to be concerned about. But I do know that there's a big dichotomy in terms of the console experience right now. And one of the biggest concerns about Microsoft buying anything or another parent company buying anything, especially when it's Sony or Microsoft, is the factor of exclusivity, which to me is probably the most toxic thing about the debate. Anytime I ever have a debate with somebody about console gaming versus PC gaming, it always comes down to exclusivity for me. It really drives me insane that can happen, could happen, that somebody says, Sony, as I'm talking to you guys, I'm staring at a Sony camera, and I'm like, grr, that's Sony, because they drive me nuts. I cannot stand exclusivity. I grew up playing Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy VII. That like defined my childhood, and it took me a year and a half to actually get to play the Final Fantasy VII remake. I waited 20 years for, because Sony's exclusivity on their own console. Now that drives me insane. So that is definitely a big concern, I think. But another thing that separates the two companies, and they both do this, by the way. I'm not giving Microsoft any extra points here. But the problem is that I'm a PC gamer. So it's like, even though I don't own an Xbox, I can easily play anything that's exclusive. If it's exclusive to Microsoft, I get to play it. So there's my bias there. But I do know, in terms of game offerings, this is going to, maybe not all at once, right? You talked about the market share, but maybe not all at once, but in terms of game availability, this is a huge thing. Like Sony's already kind of like messed up, right? They got PlayStation Now and PlayStation Network. They got two different kinds of things where they're trying to offer games. Microsoft adding to their, like, in the Game Pass, if you have the Ultimate, you also get the EA Game Pass. You get all the EA games, and you get the Microsoft Game Pass. If we're rolling up the BattleNet, the entirety of BattleNet basically, and just shoving it in the Game Pass, this is going to be a really impressive launcher, right? Like a single launch here that's going to have everything from Microsoft Game Pass. And you got to say, it's permeated the average PC gamer's experience. Like, I wasn't aware of Xbox. I haven't bought an Xbox in so many years. I'm not aware of that, but Game Pass is becoming more and more and more mentioned. And I'm like, I should get Game Pass. And I did. And they're like, here, have a free month of Game Pass. And I'm like, Discord is giving it to me. I guess I'll do it. And then you look at it and you're like, hey. And they're shoving all of this stuff in because everyone knows that the future of this kind of stuff is basically subscription-based gaming. And if you really have this big of an offering, yeah, maybe, if you're right, maybe Microsoft comes in third. I doubt it's going to stay that way.
No,
I think it's going to be huge for them, especially in terms of their rivalry with Sony, right? It's going to put them in a good place.
Could you imagine having Game Pass as a kid? Like when ABK gets rolled up into it, I mean, you can, not only is it crazy that MMOs are on consoles now, but and we'll maybe touch on this a bit before we end, but WoW may end up on WoW actually works on ARM devices. They have an ARM version of WoW.
That's insane.
Which blows my mind. So WoW may end up on literally everything. I mean, mobile devices, I couldn't even imagine it. But
don't you have a phone, Cryptic?
Yeah,
we know how much Blizzard enjoys mobile devices.
But
oh gosh,
to me, it is not only is Game Pass an insane value, and I think the price is going to go up, like Netflix steadily increased their prices. But I just couldn't imagine as a kid having Game Pass. When I was a kid and I got a video game, I played it to death because I knew the next time that I was going to be able to save up pennies to get a video game was going to be forever. So I played it until the wheels fell off, and then I was like, okay, then I'll get the next one. I mean, with Game Pass, you never run out of games.
No, and that completely changes the landscape of how games are experienced or gotten or sold. You're right. Yep. It's defining. It's defining in a market that has changed very little in the past like 30, 40 years. Like, it's kind of insane, right? Like, home gaming systems have been the same way and almost the same price point. That's what's crazy to me. Like, a video game has been $40 to $60 since they've existed, which actually blows my mind. But if you want me to date myself here on stream, and this is going to be really, really sad. You were talking about playing the game until the wheels fall off because you don't know when the next opportunity you would have to buy a game. I was doing that. Like, I would rent a video game from Blockbuster, play it like crazy, and then have to rent it again or pay overage charges because I was keeping the game too long. But for those of you who might be super old school, there was something called, now, just to give you some context, back in the day, there was a huge rivalry between Nintendo and Sega. Okay, Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo were like such a thing. And I was a Sega kid. And I was like, the Sega is black. It's cool. It's sleek. It's futuristic looking. Sonic is way cooler than Mario. Definitely going to be the one that wins. I'm putting all of my eggs in the Sega basket. I thought for sure. But one of the most interesting things that it had was a subscription service. And a lot of people may not remember that this is true. But there was something called the Sega Channel. And you had to get a network technician, like you would get a new line added to your house when you got a new telephone line added to your house. They had to come out to your house and hook this up manually, and it was basically a subscription service that you had to pay for every month that gave you a smattering of Sega games that would change every month, and so you would get to play the crap out of them every month, and then it would shuffle them, and you get a different series of games. And I actually had this for probably 6 months or something. Truly a form factor change for gaming. And I can't say that I'm unhappy about it. I think, like, right now, if Game Pass wraps up everything into it and it ends up being like like, we all hate having 27 launchers, like, what was the one that I wanted to get rid of? Like, I got Epic and Steam and Battle.net.
Origin is the one I want to get
Origin.
rid of. Origin.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Origin. Like, there's certain ones where you're like, God, do I really need another one of these? So that's like, when you see things roll up into one, that is a positive that you should acknowledge. So that should be interesting. Again, I'm also PC, so it's not really screwing me on the exclusivity. But I am interested to see where that pans out, because when they bought Bethesda, remember Microsoft bought Bethesda, and when they did, there was some exclusivity. They took things away from Sony. They made it PC and Xbox specific, but when they actually put out the press release for this, they actually said something about making the games available for people on any medium. So we'll see if it's true or not true. Very, very odd. But one of the things that I think is the most funny before we let this go is that it's Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, which used to be considered to be literal PlayStation mascots, are now the property of Microsoft, which just blows my mind, because I've been seeing that stuff for a very, very long time. So the other thing, I think that we can't not bring this up, otherwise we'll be doing very bad journalism before we move off of this, and that is that Bobby Kotick is supposedly not stepping down until after the transition of this merger. Yeah. And that is actually kind of a scary thing. I think that was a weird call on their part. We all know that they have to really distance themselves. They're buying Blizzard and Activision, right? They're buying this biggest purchase that we've ever seen in the history of gaming, and they're buying it in the midst of the greatest scandal that we've ever seen in the history of gaming. So it's really...
I do think he's still going to step down, though. But continue your point.
So he's supposed to step down, but he's not stepping down until after not just the purchase, but the transition. And there's no specific date. And basically, my take on this is that it was actually a good idea in terms of Activision and Blizzard. Whether or not it's a good idea for Microsoft will yet to be seen. But I think that those companies are damaged, irreparably damaged. I think they're carrying with them a huge amount of. We were talking about how different companies can have. Social clout, right? In addition to whether or not they're successful or not financially, everyone looks at Activision and Blizzard in a really negative way right now. So it makes sense to me that they would want to be sold. The IPs, the intellectual properties, are still of great value. Everyone wants to think that WoW is dying and it might be a shadow of his former self, but it's still the greatest money-making MMO out there. It's crazy. Diablo, Overwatch, all these things that may not be what they used to be, but they're huge. And I think a lot of people want to see them saved, but I don't think any amount of good production decision by Activision or Blizzard is going to dig them out of the hole that they're currently in. So rebranding, but trying to save the IPs makes sense. But you can't rebrand with the same team. Like, we know who we need to get rid of. It's just making it so that Microsoft is going to carry more responsibility for fixing the social side of this once the transition is made than it would have if they asked for Bobby Kotick to step down before the transition was made.
I'm surprised myself that they didn't make a clean break, because it would have been so helpful if they could have just taken it as a Microsoft company now and completely done that clean split. I'm very surprised he's not stepping down.
I will say, I think, I don't know all the financial details, but I think that's a money thing. I think Bobby gets, like, he's going to get an absurd payout no matter what happens.
Yes, he is.
But I think his payout is the most absurd, because I was reading somewhere that in his contract,
it's like $1 billion, isn't it? It's like hundreds of $1 million.
Well,
it's insane.
Yeah, but in his contract that he has for being CEO and doing nothing, his biggest payout is if the company gets bought out and he gets fired. His payout is the highest at that point. So I think Microsoft just kind of talked behind the scenes and were like, okay, you're going to step down, but you're going to step down once this merger is done. And
so you think it's part of punishing him, or at least it's trying to reduce the amount of money that he would get?
I don't think it's about punishing him. I think it's about saving Microsoft a little bit of money. And then also, like, I think the deal with Bobby was, we're going to buy your company, which is good for us and good for you. That's a 50-50. And then what we're going to do for you is we're going to let you go after the merger's done, which is good for you because it makes it look like you're leaving on good terms and you're leaving on your own terms and we're not firing you. But then that saves us some money. So we're 50-50 the whole way. You get to look good. We get to save money. So I think that's kind of what they're going for. The good news for the people that work at ABK, he's still leaving. So fingers crossed things get better for you guys. The bad news is it's a CEO leaving with a ton of money and leaving with, I mean, he's got a damaged reputation, but I mean, it's not
as
damaged.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. And it's not as damaged as we, as the consumer, wanted it to be. We wanted Bobby to be done, and leaving with, hey, I sold my company for a record $69 billion is probably going to net him another job at some point down the road, which sucks. But
yep. It means a lot of changes. I think a lot of people are just drawn to looking at big things like this in a negative light. I don't necessarily feel like it's going to be bad. I think that I'm leaving room for some of the positive things that I know could come from this. And I feel very strongly, I've been playing Blizzard games since Warcraft 2 and Diablo 1. Like,
I've been playing since Warcraft 1.
Wow, she's got me beat. So forever, dude. Like, I love these IPs. I want Diablo 4 to be awesome. Will it be? Probably not. But I hold out hope every year for something cool because I like these intellectual properties. It's been very difficult for me to be like, burn them down, because I definitely see and feel exactly why people are very upset. There's every reason to be. But it seems like such a waste. So I would like them to clean out all the bad stuff and then see what they can do with the IP. I hope. I'm literally crossing my fingers for this. I hope that it ends up good. But the last thing I'm going to say before we move on is that this is going to be a little bit different than it was with Bethesda. Bethesda was a private company when they bought them. This ABK is a publicly traded company. So as much as we want to say the purchase is going to happen and let's expect to see what's going to change right away, it's probably going to be a lot slower in terms of the actual changes and what's going to be happening. It's going to take probably a year or two before we see anything kind of come out. So that ends up being.
I'll also say one last thing that we talked about all the reasons why it sucks that Bobby's still there for now. I don't think Bobby would have, if Microsoft had bought or hadn't bought Activision, I don't think Bobby would have left in any other capacity. This was the only way for him to leave.
Yeah,
so
that's probably true.
In the end, this is a positive thing, regardless of how it turns out.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the big things, of course, that they are purchasing in addition to Call of Duty, and that is World of Warcraft. And while we're talking about this, I know that a lot of you guys don't play. I know, Cryptic, you don't play WoW, but there has to be something mentioned about World of Warcraft, because this, in the entire history of playing World of Warcraft, has never been on the table ever. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but as it turns out, I think 9.2 patch is coming very soon. 9.5, which is the following patch, plans on allowing Alliance and Horde characters to play together for the first time in 22 years or whatever it is from World of Warcraft. It's insane. So they've made a couple of really big bomb drops recently, that being, of course, the biggest one. I feel like that's weird since Buddy, and I agree. So the actual release that they wrote about this was saying that they want it to be as opt-in as possible. Now, how does that work, and what does that mean? I think that in terms of the way that they're going to roll this out, if you just create a character and you just go through the world, everyone on the opposite faction is still going to be opposite faction. But if you are in a Blizzard group, there are like these group chats, they're kind of like guilds that can exist outside of Blizzard games, right? They can just be in BattleNet in general. Or you're on their friends list with their real ID and you invite someone to a group. You can now do all instance content with the opposite faction. That's crazy. Not just being able to raid or do dungeons, but literally PvP. You're going to be able to sit in a PvP group with Alliance and Horde working together on the same team. So this is crazy, unprecedented. Obviously, they're trying, you'd like to think that they're just doing things on their own, but of course, current events are informing decisions that they're making. They're trying to garner goodwill, or at least get more eyes on them in a way that is not negative. So this is supposed to bring more people back because they feel like it's divided the player base, which it has. I mean, I can just say firsthand that the 25 times that I've tried to play WoW in my life, every time I've done it, it has been a divide. There's been some friend who couldn't play, some friend who wanted to play something different, who wasn't able to play what they wanted. It's happened as recently as in the last 4 months in our Discord community. We had people that really wanted to be Horde and people that really wanted to be Alliance last time we tried to play. So this could be big. I mean, role-playing wise, thematically, I hate it, and it's such a weird thing to do in opposition to the expansion that happened before this expansion, which is what brought everyone back to the humans versus, orcs versus humans thing with BFA, Battle for Azeroth. They really re-embraced that side of things, and now they're kind of dissolving those walls, so that's going to be interesting. I mean, I know Cryptic can't really speak to that. Junie, I bet you're excited about this.
I'm very excited about this. It was always a pain trying to get friends to play together. I mean, everyone's experienced it. It was great. It was unique. It made it interesting for role playing reasons, and there were still a ton of positives that came from forcing that split. And it also worked with their original Warcraft game series. But what I'm excited about, and this is total conjecture, it could be completely false, is maybe they're planning on taking the story in a different direction. We have no idea what's in store for the characters that we know and love, and maybe there will be some sort of at least somewhat temporarily lasting alliance, and we'll see who the big bad person is that we're going to be then fighting. So
of course that's so iconic of World of Warcraft, right? It's like when there's nothing else going on, the war between orcs and humans has been there since the beginning, but every expansion brings a new threat where we're like, oh, the world is in peril again. We need to put aside our differences and work together. 7 times in the history of WoW. This will be the first time that you really get to experience that, I think.
In a mechanical way, right? Exactly.
From a non-WoW player's perspective, I never understood the point of Horde versus Alliance. What is, other than an RP thing? Why does it exist? Why is there an arbitrary divide between players?
I mean, it is an RP thing, and it comes from the original Warcraft games. You chose either Horde or Alliance. You were the orcs or the humans, and that's just kind of the history of the game. It's where it started from, and I think it just came from that. And then because it's such an old game, it just evolved over time, and it kept that, and it became sort of its identity, which was really hard to let go of.
That's absolutely true. It isn't an arbitrary thing. It's truly the bedrock of the setting and story of Warcraft that was long before the release of World of Warcraft. So when they made World of Warcraft, when Blizzard said we want to make an MMO, it's literally like EverQuest and Dark Ages of Camelot, and that's like basically it. When they decided to make an MMO, they chose the world that they had been building already for a long time, and the entirety of that world has been built around orcs versus humans, the Horde versus the Alliance. That's been there from the very beginning. And I think the other element is that more than any game to date at that point, And maybe more than most games, even to date at this point, the game was sort of developed around its PvP and its open world PvP. Open world PvP was a very big experience, I think, for a lot of people in that game. And even if it wasn't open world, that was the source of all regular PvP. It was Horde versus Alliance, and they got to draw on all of that. And listen to an interview that said that for the longest time, they've actually been considering this, and that there have been people begging for this for a very, very long time. But there was a big concern that the code just wouldn't work. They've been building off of this code for forever. All of the content that have to unravel to be able to do this, I guess, was very intimidating, and they felt like it wasn't possible. But they said the same thing about WoW Classic, right? They said, impossible, will never happen. Not only will it never happen, you don't want it to happen. It would be a mess. And of course, that was just them being disconnected from their player base again. So I don't know, man. It could be good.
It's still weird to me because you mentioned PvP. Like EVE Online is an example. EVE Online has 4 factions, and there's a lot of PvP around those factions. That doesn't stop people in those factions from interacting with each other, doing things, being in the same corporations, alliances. You know,
don't you compare EVE to a normal MMO? Don't you do that? Okay. Pseudo MMO. That MMO is like
EVE is the most MMO.
Oh God, its
whole economy is player based. You cannot, if the players did not cooperate, EVE would not exist. It is
just it's like spreadsheets online. Spreadsheet online is what I would call that game. It's crazy.
It's spreadsheet online, but it is the most MMO you could possibly have. I mean, player cooperation is necessary. It would not. The game would fall apart if players stopped cooperating.
No, I totally get it. I totally agree. I think one of the cool things that made WoW not super duper toxic when it first came out in terms of open world PvP was that the factions were so separate. Like you brought up the fact that they could interact with each other. WoW can't. You don't speak the same language, so you literally you can gank the guy on the other team. You can even corpse camp him, and I will always remember that BUR, B-U-R, is LOL when the other person speaks. You can't. They're not like converted letters. You can't actually speak very easily by just learning the letter conversion. It doesn't work that way. But the fact that there was that disconnect between the other team, that they weren't people that you could interact with, somehow saved a lot of that toxicity. And I thought it was a really good thing. But it is true that WoW was really built around that element between those two factions. So. Oh, and the other thing was this is a fascinating topic, which is very it's very involved, and it would not be like a really casual layman's discussion, because you'd have to be an enthusiast to really understand how they're doing this. But they're basically banning boosting communities. So there's a lot of communities out there that are responsible for boosting. Players spend money, or real life money, or gold in order to be boosted or caught up in raids. It's like raid selling in Guild Wars 2, definitely a thing. But these companies work with escrow. They hold large quantities of money. It's how they shift money around. I don't know if you guys know this, but in World of Warcraft, people make their careers, like people are making more than a living wage, paying off student debts and like buying homes by trading around gold in that game. Buy non-equip items, the WoW subscription tokens. It is insane. And so like there are these huge corporations that work across all servers and have like regulated escrow and money movement and all of this stuff that advertise all over the internet and all over the game. And apparently Blizzard is finally saying no, but they're being very ambiguous about it. They're like, we don't want you to do this, but if you're doing it on a small scale, it's okay. If you're doing it cross server, it's especially not okay. And it's very bizarre. So if you guys play WoW, I encourage you to look into this. It's actually very fascinating, but I don't have enough information, and it certainly wouldn't be as interesting for everyone else to learn about it unless you know about it. But it is it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of crazy.
One thing before I think we were going to move on to the Q&A. Circling back to Lost Ark real quick, because I don't think we touched on this. I just want to get the opinion out there that, because me and you actually have a different opinion on this. I think Lost Ark is going to be just like BDO, even though I'm hyped for it. I am hyped for Lost Ark.
But I thought you loved BDO.
I know. Okay, I love BDO now.
Go player down there.
I love BDO now, but BDO released years ago. I played it when it released in the West. It was an Eastern game released in the West, just like Lost Ark is doing. And they made all these promises that it would be, when it was released for the West, it would be changed and altered and westernized. That was the big thing. We're going to westernize this MMO.
That's what they're doing here, right? That's what this is.
There were some changes, but in the end, it wasn't changed enough, and that drove a lot of players away. Now it is a very Western MMO, and it is fantastic. It is great. It is I think it's one of the best MMOs out there. I think its gear progression system is. I think its gear progression system is the best of any MMO. I will die on that hill.
That should be our next discussion. Is gear progression, end game gearing, itemization. I think that's a huge discussion that separates MMO from MMO, and it is very unique in terms of Guild Wars 2 and BDO. Right, so that would be a great podcast by itself.
Yep. But Merrick, you think that well, maybe not think, but I think you're hopeful that it will be different. Yeah, and I just wanted to get the opinion out there so that we can see in the end and come back to this and be like, I was terribly wrong,
or of me being very wrong. It's possible. Okay, so basically what Cryptic is trying to say is that this is a very Eastern game, and the markets between Eastern and Western markets, like the difference between them, the dichotomy there is significant. Different countries and different regions play games differently, expect different things. Like, the term gacha game, right? There's things like games that have you spend a lot of money through microtransaction. Those are like dirty words in the US. Right? They're bad words. Like the moment you say it, it'd be like, oh, I don't want that. It's pay to win. But that is a cultural thing. As it turns out, there are differences in different markets, and people have become aware of that as it's become more popular to take Eastern games and try to bring them over. I brought this up earlier when we were talking about Sword of Legends Online, and it is going to be no different here. Basically, it is an Eastern company that has a tried and true successful game, because Sword of Legends was successful in its market, and so is Lost Ark, very successful in its market, and they're trying to move it to the West and have us buy and enjoy it. So what that has created is a need to make some changes to tailor the game for its new market. Now, what Cryptic is trying to say is that I have greater faith in the changes being made and the result from those changes being implemented than he does, because my hope is that we as a community can bypass some of the problems that a brand new MMO has trying to enter the sphere of currently existing MMOs.
BDO did that. It just introduced new problems that aren't
right.
Normal new MMOs don't have to deal with.
And that's totally fair. We were talking about earlier, like what it is to make a new MMO, what a big risk it is to try to implement a new MMO, the various like degrees of how finished is your game, how polished is it going to be buggy upon release. We discussed all those things earlier in today's podcast, and my hope is that even without the changes being implemented from east to west, that the fact that this MMO is pre-existing, has a fan base already, that the game has been out and is polished enough that we can at least rely on a certain level of accountability in the game, that if the implementation of the Western changes to the game are significant enough, and they need to be, right? Cryptic is right. There's big differences between them, and they could be really nasty. Like if BDO made no changes and came over, we probably all would have hated it. Even Cryptic would have hated it. But my hope is that,
I mean, at the time, I wasn't a big fan when I
realized. Like when it came out. Yeah,
no.
I mean, it's true. I think for me, there's a few things that have to go right. I've never played an MMO ARPG. This isometric version is going to be interesting. This sort of open world version of a Diablo game comes with it a lot of interesting things. Am I going to get as immersed in it as I would a regular first-person or third-person MMO? I don't know. Is the end game going to be what I want it to be? That is one of the biggest things when an MMO comes out, right? When I get to max level, is there an end game and is it good? That's one thing I don't have to worry about here. It is there, and supposedly, if you believe all of the content creators out there, it's good. So, yes, are they going to kill me with microtransactions? Are they going to lock content behind, a store, or like one of the most egregious versions of this is Neverwinter. If you guys ever played Neverwinter, it is actually a pretty cool game, made by Arc Studios, right? Cryptic Studios, Arc. They are
made by Cryptic.
Yeah, made by Cryptic.
by me.
They are a pretty good game, but it's an insane pay-to-win atmosphere. So a very good game can be very easily entirely ruined by something like this not handled correctly. I'm going to put it out there. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to capture a niche that doesn't currently exist. I think the MMO ARPG vibe is going to get a lot of players from Path of Exile. That is an enormous game. If you guys don't know how big and successful PoE is, it's huge. I think that could launch this game into a really cool arena. And I also think that it fills a void of like some competitive, difficult raiding in a specific way. Like I've been talking about this a lot, and I would love to do a podcast on this as well. Final Fantasy 14, I've been playing that and raiding in that game, and the raid mechanics in that game are so complicated and so difficult that raid progression is actually challenging. It's really difficult, but it's not challenging in the same way that Guild Wars 2 is. You're not challenging your fingers. You're not challenging your reactions and the speed at which you can perform things. You're challenging your brain and your organization as a team. That's where the challenge comes in. Guild Wars 2 is the opposite. Guild Wars 2 is all about your fingers and reaction time and rotational prowess. But it is not your brain. It is not mechanics, right? The mechanics in Guild Wars 2, very simplistic. So I think that this is going to be an ARPG that's going to bring out a lot of elements from the cool ARPG experiences, but it's supposed to have very fast-paced, challenging PvE content in terms of its endgame raid scene from launch, at least from launch here in the West. So everyone, cross your fingers with me, man. I hope I'm right. If Cryptic's right,
well,
link back to this moment with me crossing my fingers and
yeah, I also think that it's going to be successful regardless, because BDO was also successful regardless. I just think that I'm scared is all I was saying, is that you could literally take all of everything that they're saying in their marketing and replace the word Lost Ark with BDO, and you'd be back 7 years ago, whenever BDO launched in the West. And it was,
That's fair, man. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay, guys, so we went much longer than I expected that we would, but I would like to open this up to any Q&A. So if you guys remember, this entire podcast is going to be uploaded on our YouTube channel tonight. There's no music and there's no issues that are going to stop us from uploading it to YouTube. So hopefully you guys will check out the thing in its entirety. But for the last section of anytime we do a podcast, we're going to open it up to Q&A. So Junie will field questions, I guess, if she's been doing that already.
I was going to say that I was fielding questions actually a little bit throughout the podcast. So the only questions we have left would really be, at least for this one, if anyone has any questions right now.
People go ahead and put your questions, but Virus had a question that I didn't really get the chance to answer very well. Long story short, no, I do not think. Virus's question was, does Microsoft and Sony's purchases, mainly Microsoft, have any bearing on things that Sony tries to purchase going forward? Since they just bought Bungie. No, I don't think so. One, I think a lot of people, because it's ironic that Sony bought Bungie when Bungie was a Microsoft company, people think it's kind of like a turf war thing. These deals have been in the work for months, especially the Bungie one has been documented to have been in the works for months. So there's no way this was kind of like Microsoft bought these guys, we have to get back at them kind of thing. The other thing is that Sony does not have the pockets that Microsoft has. Microsoft has I think it's like $200 billion of liquid cash sitting around, which is just an insane amount of money.
It's hard to conceive of that, yeah.
And to put it in perspective, when a company normally buys a company, and I believe Sony has done this with Bungie, they are not doing a liquid purchase. They are going through other avenues to acquire the company. Microsoft bought ABK with 69 billion liquid, and they still have 200 billion liquid in cash. It's mind blowing. So do I think Microsoft could eventually push to become a monopoly through acquisitions? Yes, they have the money to do that. Hopefully the FTC stops that.
God, how could they become a monopoly? There are so many game developers, systems out there, and even game game platforms, like individual platforms that are trying to roll things up into their own thing. There are so
Yeah.
many of those out there. Stadia, GeForce's
Yeah.
weird thing.
Oh, don't say
Steam.
Stadia.
Yeah, sorry. That made a splash when it first came out and then just like vanished.
No, that's Google. That's all. That's Google. What Google does with everything.
Yeah,
Splash
that's
thing.
true. That's true.
No, but I mean, Monopoly aside, I just don't think Sony has the capital to compete with Microsoft on a, who we're going to purchase level. I think they will continue to purchase people just like Nintendo may continue to purchase, like any company wants to purchase, smaller indie developers and stuff like that, build their company out. But it's just, they're just not going to, Microsoft's purchases aren't going to sway Sony one way or the other for the next acquisition that they make. The next acquisition they're going to make is going to be what's best for Sony, not really what Microsoft is doing, because Sony has to realize on a capital perspective, they just can't compete. They have to compete on a quality and, exclusivity perspective. I mean, Sony is winning the video game war right now, despite how many bad things they are doing from a, not like ABK, but like, from a, I guess like a consumer perspective. Like they just aren't, they're not doing Game Pass, which is what they should be doing. They should be doing Game Pass. So despite the missteps that they're making and the fact they can't make PS5s fast enough,
that's bad enough as it is.
Yeah, that's bad enough as it is.
I try to get in this. I get in this debate with people all the time. If you're like a hardcore PC gamer, you've gotten into this debate too, right? Like the console versus PC gaming thing. It is so crazy because it is still the most coveted, most desired thing on the planet is a PS5. It still blows my mind. It's like
I even
our
want a
3080s and 3090s, like everybody wanting one hella bad, right? And not being able to get one. But that's a shadow of like everyone wanting a PS5 so badly. And all it does is like what my PC does.
Yeah.
But it's why I personally don't understand it except for the exclusivity.
Yeah,
and every single one of these things is going to come down to intellectual properties, right? It always does. Who's got what in terms of exclusivity? And I think that this is a big move in terms of Microsoft specifically to be able to do this, because that gets them a huge advantage that they didn't have before, and kind of adds it to the advantage that they did have before, which is sort of overlapping with PC. Right? If they really branch out on that, they're going to be kind of unstoppable.
But I think Sony's next steps are continue acquisitions of probably most likely smaller indie companies. I don't think they can continue to afford doing these massive acquisitions. Smaller indie companies keep moving in the right direction with what they're already doing with exclusivity, which is why they're so successful. And try to emulate Game Pass with PlayStation now. Try to do something like that. They just don't have financially. They just can't compete with Microsoft. I mean,
neither can I.
Any company with 200 billion liquid, it can do whatever they want. I mean, so.
That's good. Good question.
I think that's it. Yeah, and I think we should wrap it up because we do have our Discord event about to start.
Yes, we do. Okay, so thank you guys for coming out. I know that we owe so many of you guys being here to Loranity, who is literally one of my favorite people and absolutely one of my very favorite streamers. If you guys have not checked her out, please do. Can we get a shout out for her in the channel? Loranity does a ton of different games and is just one of the coolest people to be around. My name is Merrick TV. This is Cryptic Villain and Junivision.
Shout out to Sarah Lou, who also rated.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I missed that one at the beginning. We are going to be doing these every single week on Friday. So if you guys are into this kind of thing, please tune in again. Follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. Join our Discord, because we actually will have a channel devoted to this podcast where you guys can debate the topics, give us new things to discuss, interact with us about whatever it is that we were talking about here. So hopefully you guys will join us for that. We also host all kinds of events in our Discord. So we do things like what we're about to do any minute that we're late for is that we do party games every Friday. So like Gartic Phone, Jackbox, Fall Guys, Among Us, all that kind of stuff. Each and every person in the Discord is welcome to join. We like to get as many people as we can. So if you guys want a good group of friends to play games with, I hope you will join us and come and play what we're playing. Oh, Isa says, what's up, Isa? Merrick TV, which of the MLP characters are your favorite? I have no idea what you're talking about. That is an acronym of which I am not at all familiar with. It doesn't even make sense to me. So we're going to end the stream right now. Let's go. It's rarity, though. I'm just, if I have to be perfectly honest.
Hey, see, you got it. You got it. You got it.
So let's go. Let's raid. Who should we raid? Who should we raid?
Oh, what a good question.
We're going to raid somebody. See, Hunting agrees. Hunting knows what's up. Definitely.
He secretly loves My Little Pony. He's the biggest My Little Pony.
That's not
ever.
true. That's a big lie. We had mentioned it earlier. The podcast is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel tonight. So if you guys missed part of this and you want to go and watch the rest of it, go and check us out at Merrick TV on YouTube. We will have that uploaded, I think, very shortly after the stream. And I think let's go and drop a giant raid on someone. What do you guys think? Muck Luck, Subject Pang.
Could raid a Black Desert player.
You know what? Let's
raid a BDO person.
Why would we do that? That's weird. We don't
Oh
play
my
that. Okay, I'm gonna drop a huge raid on a good friend of mine who's gonna freak out. Let's do that. All right, guys, again, thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Next Friday on MTV. We hope you guys have a great night, a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye.